We are 1 week away from opening day in Milwaukee. The Brewers opening day roster already going into camp seemed like it was fairly settled. Maybe just a couple of spots to watch. That's kind of what we talked about when pitchers and catchers reported, mainly center field and which guys are going to round out that starting rotation, namely one or two spots at the back end. And after some news earlier on Thursday, we are a lot closer to those decisions being made. So we're going to talk about that on this week's edition of the Brewer Fanatic podcast. Before we jump into it, I'd like to apologize for not having an episode last week. Spencer and I are coming off of the lovely experience of catching the flu last week. So we just weren't really in any condition to speak. Neither of us really had much of a voice at this time last week. So we figured we'd just rather push it off and go over some of these developments a little bit closer to opening day here when we're a little bit closer to full strength. The one thing I will say, though, is if there was a time to get sick, I'm kind of hoping we paced it out properly, where by the start of regular season Brewers baseball, we're going to be great. We're going to be lively. We're going to be healthy as oxes for the next, 6-7 months here. But we'll see if that pans out. I'm feeling better now, though. How about you, buddy?
Yes, definitely feeling a lot better than we were a week ago this time. Just, I don't want to call you out, but it's actually kind of scary. Middle of our game, all of a sudden I see Jack tilting over on the bench. He had basically passed out. So that, to give you an idea of the condition we were in, that was last Thursday. I was feeling lightheaded, and Jack legitimately did pass out. Good news was very quick to kind of regather himself, and he was okay, and we were fine, and everyone was all right. But a little bit of a scary moment, and yeah, we were not in good shape last week. I'm still dealing with the cough part of the whole equation a little bit. I think you have it a little bit left still too, Jack, but for the most part, much better shape. I don't know if I've been considered healthy as an ox for years now, no matter whether we're talking sickness or anything. But hopefully we did get past the rough part. We've got our own conference season coming up now, like a lot of stuff that it's going to get really, really busy with a lot of fun baseball stuff. And ideally, we're both going to be a lot healthier for that now, getting this one out of the way. So, apologies for not being here last week. Like Jack said, it probably wasn't the worst timing, as we're going to talk about during this one too. There isn't a ton of super exciting developments coming out of spring training at the moment, so maybe not the worst week for us to have missed, but definitely both, I think, in a better place now and feeling a lot better myself for sure.
Well, I didn't know that was going to be public knowledge here.
Had to.
2.5 minutes into the podcast, but I guess that's kind of becoming my MO in a not so good way, just ending up on the ground of various baseball settings, whether it's on the ground of a press box because I tried to catch a foul ball, or on the ground of a college dugout in Fort Myers because I decided that even with a pretty bad fever, I still needed to show up and help game plan
Absolutely.
for D3 college baseball and help call pitches and do scouting and all that kind of stuff. But that's in the past. Everybody's okay now. We're going to move on from that. And we're going to move into some Brewers news here. We'll start with the most immediate news and maybe work our way backward a little bit here. But several reporters who are still on the scene in Maryvale reporting this morning that Pat Murphy said the Brewers have optioned Blake Perkins, Tyler Black, and Logan Henderson to AAA Nashville. Cooper Pratt was also reassigned to minor league camp. A little bit of fallout from this move. First of all, we talked about Brandon Lockridge a lot. This would seem to indicate that he has a spot on the opening day roster because it was looking like you were going to have probably two of those primary center field types getting roster spots between Garrett Mitchell, Blake Perkins, Brandon Lockridge. And it looks like Lockridge won out against Perkins, which I'm going to assume this is not an easy decision for the Brewers because Pat Murphy really likes Blake Perkins. Blake Perkins has been a big part of not only the Brewers' efforts on the field, but also a big part of their clubhouse and a part of their culture over the last several years. But Spencer, I'll ask you about this as well, but this was objectively the correct decision. Brandon Lockridge, I think at this point in time, is a better baseball player than Blake Perkins. I know Blake Perkins has really impacted the game with his glove over the last few years, but when he came back from that shin fracture last year, he was still completely solid out there in center field, but not quite the same guy that he was before the injury. Brandon Lockridge is a guy who has been regarded as a very, very good defensive center fielder. And if that version of Blake Perkins we saw last year is a little closer to who he is in the field now, Lockridge probably matches him defensively at the very least. And then you have to factor in the very real strides that Brandon Lockridge has made on offense, which now give him a much higher ceiling than Blake Perkins at the plate. You know, it's spring training, and you always have to take everything with a grain of salt. Really, what you're looking for in this time is, has there been a tangible change? A tangible, quantifiable change in like the physical things a guy is doing on the baseball field, or the physical things that he's showing he's capable of, not the results, but like the actual process based physical part of playing a baseball game. And, you know, when you talk about Vinny Capper last year, Vinny Capper, for example, was a guy who said that he changed some of these things, said he added bat speed, became very evident. There were even some signs in spring training when they did play on StatCast fields. He did not actually add bat speed. He didn't even really train bat speed. He did like some mixed martial arts and some roundhouse kicks and said that that was going to make him more explosive and called that bat speed training. Which whatever, he put in the work, but it's not really what he actually said it was. In Brandon Lockridge's case, he has demonstrably added bat speed. He is swinging harder. He's not trying to crush the ball, but he's very clearly made a point of trying to drive it a little more, trying to hit it harder on a line at the very least. Kurt Hogue wrote a very nice story on that from Maryvale where he talked about some of those changes, and you can dive into that if you want to hear more. But the point being, Brandon Lockridge has very clearly changed some things. Do we know for sure it's going to lead to results in the regular season? No, but all things considered, he is a better player than Blake Perkins right now, and the Brewers acted accordingly.
Yeah, it really is that simple. And like you said, it's difficult for a guy who has not only, I think he's obviously a great teammate. People love Blake Perkins, love having him around. Pat Murphy has talked about his character along with his ability to play a bunch of times. But in the end, you do have to keep your best players. And I think you could probably make an argument for the third guy that we haven't really mentioned here being the one who could have been the odd man out just based on where he's been at in spring training. And that's Garrett Mitchell, who the whiff rate has been like 48%, I believe, so far in spring training this year. And the strikeout rate has been similar. So it's a small sample, but not really showing the signs of what you would hope to see from a guy like Mitchell in spring training. Obviously hitting the ball extremely hard when he does make contact. That's been there for him. But you could argue, I think, that maybe Perkins and Lockridge could have been your guy. And I know we got a question from Lance before any of this news came out today, asking about the odds of Mitchell starting the year in AAA and mentioning that, Murph likes Blake Perkins and Lockridge. So could Mitchell be the odd man out? Obviously, the answer is he's not going to be, at least to start the year. I would say there's definitely a world where by mid-May, whether it's because of Mitchell's performance or because Garrett Mitchell just unfortunately cannot stay on the field, or has struggled to stay on the field, I should say, in terms of health, I think there's a decent chance those two end up being the center field options at some point early in the season. But for now, they are obviously going to go with Mitchell and Lockridge, and between Lockridge and Perkins, for all the reasons you just mentioned, Jack, I think they're making the correct call. He's been a better player in spring, not just results-wise, but also just process-wise. It is impressive to look at some of the under-the-hood numbers for him and see that a lot of like the actual batted ball data has been very good for him. And we already talked about, he beat his max exit velocity at any level, at least anything that was tracked already this spring. But even just generally, he is hitting the ball hard on average when he's up there. Like, it's not just a couple outlier ones. Like, on average, he is hitting his average exit velocity, and this is only 26 balls in play, I think, but 94.2 miles per hour. Like, he's hitting the ball really hard. And for a guy with his speed, and like you said, the defense has shown and graded out very well, both scouting wise and in the majors, outs above average has been really kind to him in the field. there's just a lot to like there. And with Perkins, like you mentioned, the defense not quite being at the same level post shin injury last year. Now, if he's healthy this year, it may be back to where we've seen it before. And that's obviously a very, very, very high level and something that's extremely valuable. But for now, I don't think there's too much of an argument if you're truly going based off of merit for Perkins over Lockridge. I think it was a pretty obvious choice, and they made the one that I would have made too.
Yeah, I do think that if that was the choice, I think they got that right. But, on Mitchell, it's tricky just going off of anything in spring training, but he has not, and disclaimer, I'm saying this as the guy who's pretty much always been the low guy on Garrett Mitchell, like since he was in AA. But he does not look like he's ready for big league at bats to me. I don't think so. So I really would have thought very seriously about just not even making it a choice between Perkins and Lockridge, but saying, hey, Garrett Mitchell just needs more at bats. He needs some reps in AAA to start the year at least, and just go with Perkins and Lockridge as your center field mix. But the other fallout of this move is it does seem to cement that Garrett Mitchell is, at the very least, he's going to be on the roster. And if he's on the roster, I would assume he's going to be the starter in center field, because I don't think they would roster him to play the bench. Now, maybe they take it easy with the off days a little bit early, but nonetheless, he's seems like for the third straight season now, or the fourth straight season now, I should say, they want Garrett Mitchell to be their guy in center field, which again is tricky because we've had these concerns about the profile for such a long time, and he's never actually played enough to answer the question of, is this going to be an issue for him? Like, we still don't know if Garrett Mitchell is actually a viable big league hitter, and we're entering year 4 here of his big league career, year 5.
He's in arbitration now, so yeah.
But it seems like he's going to get the opportunity. But just to kind of point to what I'm seeing right now for him, and I did just write about this earlier on Thursday. The whiffs have obviously always been an issue. We've talked about the high fastballs and all that stuff. But the other side of the coin has always been that the pitches that he hits very well, he absolutely destroys them. And the swing rate on high fastballs, it hasn't been like insanely low, but it's generally been low enough where guys haven't quite been able to attack that enough to sink him. And it seems like he's forced enough pitchers back into his hot zones, which are very, very hot. But this spring, he's again coming off another disjointed season. The Brewers have been very careful with ramping him up because of the injury concerns. The whiffs have just been astronomical against everything. Like everything. Not just the pitches that he's historically been bad against everything. And the one that alarms me is, again, the fastball whiffs are like insane right now. But what's alarming me a little bit right now is he's also whiffing on like the mistake pitches below the belt that he used to hammer. So Garrett Mitchell, for his career in the big leagues, he has a very high whiff rate on breaking balls overall, but almost all of that is because all those whiffs on breaking balls are coming on breaking balls below the strike zone. Breaking balls in the zone, he has a career zone contact rate of 80% against breaking balls. This year in spring training, he's whiffing on, I don't have the number in front of me, it's in the story, but excuse me. I think the number is like he's whiffing on like almost 60% of in-zone breaking balls, or like 50% of in-zone breaking balls. It's something insane. And again, very small sample, but now you're getting into the pitches that he normally does hit. Now he's whiffing on those too. And I've talked to some people who are still down there, and it just seems like he is so geared up for like trying to hit the high fastball now, because he knows that's an issue. He's been working really, really hard at trying to fix that. To his credit, he did some stuff early in spring training. When I was down there, he raised his hands. He ended up bringing them back down to where they usually are. And that's kind of a whole can of worms too. When I see a guy trying to make a lot of different adjustments, that almost discourages me from his outlook, because that tells me he's just nothing is locked in right now, or like where it needs to be if he's really still having to feel things out like that. But now it feels like he's caught in between, especially now that he's whiffing out in front of those hanging breaking balls that he used to get to. It's like he's trying to get to the high fastball, but he's still not. And now he's whiffing on the mistake breaking balls he used to hit. He's also got like a nearly 80% whiff rate on off speed pitches, so changeups and splitters and screwballs and forkballs and what have you. It's not good right now. And again, he is still hitting the ball very hard when he puts it in play. He's only got 2 hits in spring training. One of them is a 460-foot home run. Like, we've always tried to be very clear. Like, the ceiling here is insane, and it still is. Like, you're talking like probably one of the best offensive ceilings still in the entire organization. But the whiffs have always been an issue, and now they look even worse than they've ever been. And that's not to say it's not going to start getting back to at least where he's always been with time, but if it needs time, maybe he should just be going down to Nashville for a couple weeks to try to iron some of these things out, especially after, a bit of a slower buildup here. But it's clear now that that's not the route that the Brewers have chosen to take.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would imagine there's an element of, like we talked about a little bit when they called up Miz last year, like, do they feel like they're wasting healthy bullets of Garrett Mitchell by sending him down while he is healthy? And I don't know that I would agree with that type of thought process, but I could see them thinking that way because, as I mentioned, it just hasn't really been very often that you've been able to get him on the field, and you have the opportunity to get him on the field. And like you said, and like we've talked about a number of times, the ceiling is ridiculous. It's still extremely high. And that's not just the offense, but it's the fact that the offensive ceiling so high combined with a guy who's already a very good defensive center fielder, one of the best athletes you'll find on a baseball field. Like, there's so much to dream on. And I get why a lot of people do dream on it. And I think to an extent the Brewers still can't help but dream on it. But I think the correct call would be to have, while he's working through these issues, and like you mentioned, Jack, he's making adjustments. He's making changes to his stance, to his swing. And we're getting a week away from opening day here. Like, to me, that's a perfect time for him to go to AAA, start the season there, let him work through these adjustments, let him work on whatever he feels he needs to work on. And if he comes out of it on the other side, 1, healthy, and 2, in a better spot, then that's great. Then you go from there, and maybe he is your center fielder this year. But I don't know that I would be banking on it to start the year. And we've seen plenty of times the opening day lineup, it means next to nothing for what's going to happen the rest of the season. But for me, it would just make more sense to go in with a little bit of a safer, in my eyes, a safer pick with Perkins and Lockridge, while you let Mitchell kind of work through what he's trying to figure out right now and in a lower stakes environment.
So that's kind of what the center field mix looks like. We should probably also talk about the pitching mix with Logan Henderson out of the mix. It's looking a little more concrete with what the Brewers are going to go with. It's probably going to be some combination of Jacob Mizorowski, Brandon Woodruff, Chad Patrick, probably Kyle Harrison, and then Brandon Sproat to round it out, which not terribly surprising to me. I think we both said right off the bat after the Mets trade that we thought Sproat should open the year in the rotation, and he probably should be the favorite for that last spot. Kyle Harrison as well. I think he put himself on the map with what he was able to do in spring training. An update on him, he did leave Wednesday's start with a blister. We're going to get to that a little later, but I think it's just more topical now. Pat Murphy said it's something he's been dealing with, and they're not really concerned about it being a setback. We did get a question from Sprawl135 on Twitter who asked, pure stuff, especially the changeup on Harrison looks great. Results have not matched. What are your expectations for him? Again, like I don't care really about results, especially for pitchers. I would argue it probably matters even less for pitchers than it does for hitters, because pitchers, they're not going to be sequencing the same way that they do in real games. I think there's an even greater difference in what these games are like for them compared to position players. You're also playing with not amazing defense behind you. There's balls getting lost in the sun, which, to Harrison's credit, he did have a lot of that stuff happen to him in one of his spring training outings. So to me, it's more like, does the stuff look good? Are you limiting walks? That's honestly probably it. And I think both of those boxes have been checked. So not the guy who I was like the highest on out of all the pitchers the Brewers have brought in, but probably a guy that I overlooked a little bit too, just having the prospect pedigree. Maybe that's me just gravitating toward diamonds in the rough a little more instead of the more obvious uh, breakout pick or obvious guy to like. But with that changeup, I really like what he's able to bring. I think that's going to be a very big difference maker for him.
I was gonna say I think the changeup changed things for his outlook quite a bit. Like it was an interesting. I mean, it was a very interesting outlier type fastball from an interesting slot that has always been the pitch that kind of carried the profile that everyone looked at as like, okay, he's got the fastball. What can you figure out with the secondaries? The slurve's been in a decent spot, I would say, in spring as well. And then this changeup though changed so much. Like it makes him such a different type of pitcher against righties, or at least gives him the capability of being such a different pitcher against righties now, where he's got a legit weapon that he can use against that side of the plate that he didn't have before. It was a very mediocre changeup prior to this offseason, and that changed everything for him. And we'll see how it plays out. I'm not saying it's going to make him some surefire starter for the Brewers moving forward, but he absolutely looks the part of one right now. And yeah, like you said, in spring, are we showing decent command? Is the stuff looking good? That's all I care about. I mean, even just looking at, like, I think it was Wednesday, when he made his most recent start, looking at some of like the pitch breakdowns and some of the stuff that he was throwing, like it seemed pretty clear to me that they were going pretty heavy on the slurve at times, where like in a game, I don't think that's the pitch they would have been going to, but they were going pretty heavy on it because it's spring training. They need to work on it. Let's see how it looks in certain counts and against certain batters. And like in that moment, are you throwing a lefty to a righty sweeper or a slurve instead of a changeup in that spot? Almost certainly not. But in spring, why not? Because now's the time you get to work on it. We're going to try different things, see how you can command it, see if we can backdoor it in this spot if you're comfortable with that type of stuff. And then in a real game, they're not going to ever throw that pitch, or hardly ever going to throw that pitch. So I think that's always something you have to keep in mind. I agree with you, even more than position players. Pitchers are just working on stuff more than anything else. They are working on different pitches, on different types of sequences, on different things that then they get in the regular season, and they're not going to be doing that. So the stuff looked good. I think the walk rate's at like 7% for the spring. That, to me, that's plenty. He looks like a guy who's ready to pitch in the big leagues.
So to quickly go over how the roster looks right now, the position players left in camp at the catcher position, you got William Contreras, Gary Sanchez, Reese McGuire is still here. Probably going to be that last cut. I would guess he's still just hanging around in case there's some kind of injury here leading up to opening day, because he is on a minor league deal. Probably just keeping him around just in case something happens for logistical purposes. But if everything holds, he won't make the team. In the infield, Jake Bauers, David Hamilton, Joey Ortiz, Luis Rengifo, Bryce Terang, and Andrew Vaughn. And then that outfield mix, Jackson Chourio, Sal Frelick, Brandon Lockridge, Garrett Mitchell, plus Christian Yelich, who, once again, will probably be primarily a designated hitter this year. We'll see if he gets a little more time in left just to make room for maybe some more lineup combinations here with Sanchez, with maybe Jake Bauers if he's hitting a little bit better than he has in years past, if he continues what he did in the fall. We'll see. But that group minus McGuire is basically your opening day roster on the positional side. Like I said, we broke down the rotation a little bit. Speaking of that rotation, the Brewers did get an update on Quinn Priester, who visited a specialist in Dallas last week. And we kind of talked about this at the last update. Like, everything is pointing to some kind of internal structural deal here that's going to need to be unmasked a little bit. And there is an issue under the hood here. A little bit of a scary one. It's a nerve issue in Quinn Priester's shoulder that is contributing to some of these wrist issues that he's had that have since kind of started shooting up the rest of the arm. Pat Murphy said that it is a nerve issue, quote, in the TOS, so thoracic outlet syndrome family, end quote. But that's usually something that requires surgery. The Brewers do not think that Quinn Priester is going to need surgery. We'll see kind of how that pans out, but he's still throwing lightly. He's scheduled for a bullpen in a couple of days. So this has not still shut him down. But there probably could have been worse news here, and there probably could have been better news. Right now, the Brewers are just kind of in wait-and-see mode to see how that treatment impacts Quinn Priester and if he's able to make his debut maybe sometime in late April or in May.
Yeah, I think we didn't really say it, but I think we both kind of hinted at like it feels like it has to be some sort of nerve type thing just because it's radiating through the arm. It doesn't seem like it's actually coming from where the pain is in the wrist. So it just felt like it had to be something like that. You never love to see the thoracic outlet words thrown around in any circumstance. However, given that they don't believe it is going to require surgery at this point, I do think, like you said, it's not good news per se, but it's definitely not as bad as you could have gotten here. And for now, I mean, like you said, they're kind of still looking at potentially end of April, early May. I don't know how much I personally buy that type of timeline. That feels a little quick just to pretty much build him up from scratch and do all of that stuff. But if everything goes perfectly, I guess that would be around that timeline. So we'll hope for that, obviously. But yeah, it definitely could have been worse. I just never like to see anything related to the TOS name come up because that's obviously one that is not kind to pitchers. If it does end up being, closer to the true version of that right now, it doesn't sound like it is, but yeah, not something I like to see. And that was when that first came out and I didn't really see the family part of the equation. And I didn't necessarily know the whole timeline. I just seen a quick quote about it. I was like, oh, that could be a really big problem. In the end, it sounds like it's for now much better than that. And yeah, hopefully he can kind of stay on that timeline of early-ish May. That would be really good news, I think, for him and the Brewers.
Well, we talked about the Brewers bringing in a ton of pitchers going into camp with as many as 17 rotation options, and they were right.
Yeah.
Because they're already dropping like flies. So,
yes, they are, and yes, they were.
Let's quickly go through a couple more injury updates here from Brewers camp. Start with a few more pitchers. Bullpen mix also getting a little bit of clarity because of a couple of these injuries. So, one of the guys that we had talked before about really with how is he going to fit, Rob Zastryzny, more of a stricter lefty specialist out of options. We kind of talked about how the Brewers could probably make it work around him because the rest of their lefties aren't really platoon guys. But it's not even an issue they're really going to have anymore because Rob Z is going to miss a few weeks with a shoulder strain. He's got a left rhomboid strain. He suffered that while pitching in the World Baseball Classic. So he's shooting for a bullpen session here in a couple of days. But it seems like at this point, probably not going to open the year with the team. Going to take a step back a little bit, and maybe we'll see him in a couple of weeks, but probably not making the opening day roster. Craig Yoho, guy who was almost certainly not making the opening day roster. He's got a right calf injury, suffered that on March 12th. Right now, he is reportedly shooting toward an April 15th return to pitching in games, presumably in Nashville at that point, but kind of see how everything lines up. Logan Henderson, he had to back off for a little bit because of some right elbow soreness. As a reminder, he had that issue with the elbow last season that knocked him out for most of the second half. Sounds like he's okay, and there weren't really any issues there. He's going to make a multi-inning appearance tomorrow, actually, or on Friday is when he's scheduled for it. So just needing to take a step back for a couple days. Sounds like it didn't really interfere too much with him stretching out, but guy who, again, option to AAA. He's going to start the year as depth down there. It gives him maybe a little bit of an opportunity to kind of take things slow as well with building out. Finally, a couple of outfielders. Akil Baddoo suffered a left quad strain. It's going to sideline him for a few weeks here, a couple months. He injured himself running to first base earlier this month on March 9th, and an MRI revealed that it was a little bit more of a substantial injury than player and team initially believed. And I don't think we ever went over this one, but it has been on the radar for a while. Stuart Baroa has a right shoulder strain, and he's scheduled to be back probably early April at some point. But again, another guy who's probably going to be minor league depth for the Brewers. He's getting treatment, though, for that. And he'll be back in Nashville, presumably in a couple of weeks here. That's all for injury updates for now. We'll see if there's anything new on that front next week. Finally, a couple more observations from games here. Nothing too new from what we had talked about already. Jake Bauers is still looking really good, hitting the ball very hard. I think we had talked about that a couple weeks ago as well. Andrew Vaughn also doing some really good stuff in spring training, hitting the ball really hard, 60% hard hit, 13% barrel rate. Chase rate, it looks like, has held. A lot of the improvements he made there with the Brewers last season, continuing to look really, really good on that front. So I think there's a pretty decent chance here this may be one of the more productive first base tandems the Brewers have had in a good bit here.
Yeah, I think it's shaping up to be that way. And we've talked about Bauers a couple times, and honestly, if he's hitting and he's swinging like he has been, you mentioned maybe Yelich plays some left. I think there's a pretty good chance we see Bauers out and left a decent amount of the time too, just to get him in the lineup, because not that what he's doing in spring training is what he's going to do in the regular season. I mean, he's got like a 1,500 OPS almost in spring training, but we talked about how he finished the season last year. That's kind of carried into spring, where the whiff rate's in a really good spot along with the hard hit. And that's a really good sign for him. He's a good enough athlete to handle left field. Honestly, it's not related to playing left field, but just base running wise, he's one of my favorite base runners on the team. I think he's a sneaky, very, very good base runner. Not just in the ability to like kind of sneak up on you and steal a base, but in terms of like dirt ball reads, he's one of the few guys who will take them almost every time on the Brewers. Seems to have just good reads off the bat and stuff. Like, it quietly does a lot of really little things well. So yeah, I'm pretty in on Bauers this year, and then seeing Vaughn carry over a lot of the stuff that made him a much better hitter in Milwaukee last year in the spring this year is also super encouraging. So like you said, I think this could be one of the more productive overall first base production that the Brewers have gotten over the course of the season in quite a while, probably looking back at the Thames, Aguilar, like the 2018 guys. Like, that could be probably that would be the best in recent years, unless I'm missing somebody. Rowdy had a decent overall season in 21, I believe that was, or 22 maybe, but either way, I think there's a pretty good chance this will be the best production they've gotten since that 2018 duo, which was obviously very good.
Not so great update here. This one coming very recently. Brewers are playing on Thursday night as we're going through this. Brandon Woodruff's on the bump. He is down to 87 to 88 on the fastball velo, and I know the Brewers have taken things slowly with him, but at this point, for a guy who seemingly they're hoping is on track to, if he misses time, it's maybe the first or second turn through the rotation. Not exactly looking like the stuff is quite up to speed to that point yet. Also just interesting because I remember last year just the Brewers expressing some confidence that there was going to be potentially more of a velo bump another year removed from the surgery. Obviously, we're not seeing that yet. So something to monitor. And we've talked about it plenty when he was coming back from that injury last year. He can get outs at 92 or 91. Once you start dipping south of 90, though, then it gets a little bit harder to, even with the pitchability traits that he's shown, expect that there's going to be more consistent outs. And yeah, that's a little alarming because I had maybe kind of just put it more as money in the bank. Like, when Brandon Woodruff's healthy, it's going to be good based on what we saw last year. Wasn't quite expecting to see 87 and 88 on March 19th or March 20th.
Yeah, it's very concerning. Like you said, we talked about it a lot last year. Once you saw it get up to like 92, 93, we felt pretty good about him. We thought he was going to be able to handle big league hitters and get outs at the big league level. Now, I don't think either of us expected it to go as well as it did last season, and I don't think either of us were expecting it to go that well this year over the course of a full season. But this would be an issue if, and we should be clear, like it wasn't sitting there from the start. This was in the fourth inning that it dropped down to this level. I was checking earlier though, and it was a lot of like 90, 91. There were some 92s and a couple 93s early on in the game. I didn't pay too much attention to what kind of happened in the second and third. So I don't know if he held around there and then it fell off in the fourth, but if he's going to start games, obviously he's going to have to be able to hold the velo as he gets a little bit deeper into games. And last year, even we kind of saw it climb usually as the game went on. He was actually hitting a little bit higher on the radar gun in like the third, fourth, fifth innings than he was in the first and second most of the time. So that is concerning. It is spring training. I'm not shocked that like I wasn't shocked at seeing some low 90s from him in spring. Like I think that's what he would have been at last year if he was in the same place health-wise that he was throwing 93 in big league games. That there's a different level of adrenaline for a guy like Brandon Woodruff, who's been through spring training. He's been through these games. It's not his first time coming off injury, so these spring games don't mean as much to him as last year's games did even. But 87, 88 is a different level that you do not want to see at any point. And we're not talking like cutters or any. These were actual four-seam fastballs. So that'll be something to watch for sure. It kind of reads to me like a guy who could maybe use a quick IL stint with a couple rehab starts in AAA to start the season, and that might be best for him. Who knows? Maybe they end up going that route. Like we've said, there are still starting pitcher options that could help get through a couple turns in the rotation if needed. But it seems like that's not really the plan. And yeah, I'd be a little concerned by this kind of development. Who knows how it'll play out? But if it is going to be something where he's into the 80s by like the fourth inning, I wouldn't anticipate that second time through the order going very well for Brandon Woodruff. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Well, we'll wrap things up with a few listener questions to close out the week. We'll start with Andrew, who asked, do you take anything away from Sal Frelick's struggles at the plate this spring, or chalk it up to spring training and it doesn't matter? Jack, when you saw him at the start of spring training, was he as big as he was at the start of spring last year when he put on all the weight? So Spencer actually took the liberty here of pulling up a couple of metrics from Sal Frelick, comparing his regular season last year to spring training this year. Just from looking at some of these numbers, maybe the swing decisions are a little bit worse, but otherwise, I'm kind of, more than anything, I'm just seeing regression. Like Sal Frelick and I think we talked about it a little, maybe not enough, like Sal Frelick is a major regression candidate for this year, because while he did improve last year, probably not quite to the extent that the actual production improved. Like we had looked at the home run output, probably not very likely to match that because he had a lot of like just squeaked him over the right field fence, which maybe he's really figured out how to do that repeatably. I don't like to bet that a guy has figured out how to do that repeatably though. So I think he probably is, in my mind, I would project him for a lot closer to like that 95 OPS plus than, more of that 115 or whatever he was around last year, because I do think some of the power numbers are going to take a little bit of a hit. Just looking under the hood, like his expected WOBA from the regular season last year was 291. This year in spring training, it's actually 319. So, I mean, the only thing I'm seeing here that looks a little bit different is more chase. And that's something that I think will probably get sorted out over time. I'm not too alarmed by that right now because it's just spring training. Everything else, though, I think it's a lot more of just the way that he hits the ball. He's just probably finding the number of gloves that he should be finding compared to what happened last year.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of going the opposite direction of last year, where he was definitely, there was some pretty good luck involved. Like you said, the ex-WOBA last year, 291, the actual weighted on base average was 330. So that's he overperformed the expected number there by almost 40 points. Like that's a big difference. Actually, I would wonder, it was probably one of the bigger ones on the team, at least, and probably one of the bigger ones in the league. So there was definitely some luck involved there. Now, I do think he's somebody that I could see kind of overperforming in that regard somewhat regularly, just because of how weird his profile is and the speed and like the infield hits that he's going to get and that type of stuff. But yeah, in spring right now, it's a 319 xWOBA and then a 224 actual weighted on base average. He's actually hitting the ball harder in spring on average. Like you said, more chase, which that's not great. The swing decisions last year in reality were okay. He took a lot of pitches in the zone, and he was fine in terms of not chasing. Now he's chasing a lot more in spring. But like you said, I think that's something that probably over the course of a larger sample we'll see kind of even out. But yeah, I think he's more likely to regress just because he's not as good as he showed results wise last season, not because he's doing anything differently or because he's completely changed how he hits or anything. It's just kind of true regression to the mean that he never really had hit him last year. And this year might be a little bit of an over adjustment. And maybe you see him underperform some of those metrics. And then it looks like he had a much worse season. And in reality, process wise, not much actually changed. That wouldn't be surprising to me at all. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that 95, I could still see him being like a league average hitter, even if things do come together in a just a more realistic way for his expected abilities and everything else, partially because again, I do think he'll get those hustle doubles and those infield singles that can help some of that a little bit. But yeah, nothing's really different in spring compared to what he was doing last year, other than a bit more chase, and that's in a pretty small sample. So I don't think he's in danger of like completely changing how he does things, and that causes any issues. I think it's just baseball might baseball the opposite way for him a little bit more this year, and that's where you see some regression. And it's really nothing that he changed or did differently. It's just that he got a bit lucky last year, and maybe he doesn't get quite as lucky this year. Obviously, as a Brewer fan, I hope he does get as lucky, and I hope the same approach works out great for him. But I think the odds are probably in the other favor.
It does look like the air pull rate is down quite a bit in the spring, but again, you're talking 36 balls in play. Like that's not
right.
It's not a lot to go off of. So yeah, but yeah, I would think it's a little more of just the results are probably going to look quite a bit different this year without a whole lot under the hood actually changing.
Yep.
We got a question from Joe who asks, I know it's not an important issue, but why is there an off day on Friday after opening day? It's totally useless. I want someone to blame this on because it is really, really dumb. Starting the season on Friday afternoon or night wouldn't be bad either. We have a roof, 3 exclamation points. I get that opening day was or is always a day game. That's because they had to play outside and it's cold at night in April or March. If you wanted more people to attend and to watch, why not move it to a later time in the day? I only attend because I've been going to every opening day for 20 plus years now. In the past 4 years, games might have been sellouts, but the stands are not full with fans. Lots of room in the terrace levels for people that didn't make it in or didn't get to their seats. So I think the scheduling is mostly just because MLB wants to have a universal schedule for opening day. They want everybody who is playing to be playing at the same time. So I think that's more what that is about. It's not so much a weather thing. And I believe that also extends to the way that they do the off day because they do that for the other teams who are playing outdoors. And they're just not going to make exceptions for one team. They want to have that uniformity in the way that it's scheduled.
Yep. I think that's got to be what it is. It is annoying, though. It does always suck, especially as a Brewers fan, when they do happen to actually get a home opener. And it's like, oh, baseball season starts. You get to watch a game, and you're so used to like, oh, baseball's going. Now I get to watch baseball like every day, and then it's an immediate off day, and you're just, oh, okay. I guess I got a little taste. Now I got to wait another day for the rest of the season to really get going. But yeah, I've always found it annoying too, and obviously I understand the logic behind it. I think you could argue that yes, like the uniform approach to opening day does make for an interesting type of like setup, I guess. But at the same time, you could probably argue that like the indoor teams waiting until Friday, or the teams with a roof waiting until Friday, could actually get them more attention on their games. And then instead of almost an entire off day for baseball, you actually have baseball on their true opening night or whatever they do on Wednesday night, because there's one game on Wednesday, if I recall. And then you've got your Thursday games for the teams that are outdoors who may get rained out and could wind up on Friday. And then you've got your indoor roof teams on Friday who get like their own set of games. I think that could work out better for MLB in terms of actually getting more people to watch games, because more people would tune in whatever day their team isn't playing. But whatever, obviously they feel this is the best way to do it. There's probably a lot more research than what I just put into my brain thinking through scenarios for like 30 seconds going on MLB's side in terms of marketing and what's best for the game. But that would make sense to me. It'd be an interesting way to do it. It wouldn't really change too much because, you know, people would still be waiting for opening day, whatever, whether it's Thursday or Friday. But yeah, I think it's more of an annoyance when it is a team like the Brewers, just because we've got the roof and we know that it's not going to be an issue. And then baseball starts and then it's just, you got to wait another day right away.
We have a prospect question. This will be for Spencer. Sprawl 135 asks, is Braylon Antunes starting the year in the ACL or the DSL?
Yes, it is. It's a good question. He's stateside now. So once guys come stateside and they're over here for spring training, almost certainly going to start the actual regular season in the States. There's been very rare occurrences where a team will send them back over to play in the DSL rather than stay here for the complex league. I think the more interesting question, because Antunes has been really good, it sounds like, on the backfields. Kurt Hogue got a pretty good video of him taking Aaron Ashby deep to right center the other day, and I later found out he hit that ball 110 miles per hour. So 17-year-old going to right center as a righty off of a big league pitcher at 110 miles per hour. I think that's pretty noteworthy. I've seen video of some other homers he's been hitting down there in games. A guy who was a pretty big name in the class, the guy that I was most excited about in the 2020, I guess that would have been 2025 international class, just didn't have a good season in the DSL. Nothing was really stood out in a positive way. But the fact they brought him stateside and he's now crushing the baseball, I think that's pretty noteworthy. It's something to keep an eye on. And the better question could be, does he start with the Wilson Warbirds, who are going to be kind of short on outfield options? And given the situation that the lower levels might be in for outfielders, I could see a world where, with Antunes having that good of a spring, maybe he does start in low A and takes kind of that Churio, Made, that type of path. Because after the DSL season, I don't think anyone was really viewing him in that light. I think the assumption was that he would maybe come stateside and play in the ACL. I think this spring could be opening in some eyes and changing some opinions on him, and it wouldn't shock me. I guess we'll leave it at that. Who knows? I have no idea, but it wouldn't shock me if he ends up kind of skipping that complex league and going to low A.
Finally, we got a question. This was from a while back before last week when we didn't have a show, from Andrew, who said, after watching Shane Drowan, it looked like he was pretty gassed in his third inning on Monday. So this would have been last week, Monday. With how little he's thrown in the past 2 years due to injury, do you think he's a multi-inning bullpen role? Would that be the best move for him? He could be a great Ashby replacement when he gets too expensive. So, in fairness to the question here, Drowan did pitch again since then, and he went a little bit deeper into the game, and the stuff held for a little bit longer. So, but again, like that, we hadn't seen that before that. So, this is not a knock on the question or anything, because, you know, Andrew would have no way to know otherwise. But I really want them to try as hard as they can to keep him as a starter, because I think he has a starter's arsenal. And granted, I said the same thing about Ashby several years ago as well. But I do think that there's some still pretty decent starter upside here. And just for depth reasons, it makes sense to keep him stretched out. Now, does he get more outs in the big leagues this year as a reliever later in the season? Maybe that's the way that it ends up going down. I do think he's going to get some big outs for them at some point. But I really do think he can make it work as a starting pitcher. I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I think you send him to AAA, you keep him stretched out as a starter, and then as the season progresses, you see what the big league team needs and whether he could maybe fill that Aaron Ashby role. Who knows what's going on with Ashby this year? Hopefully he's healthy and able to have a whole season again, but you never know. And yeah, he can. I think he could fill either of those roles, but for now, I think the most value you can get out of somebody is if they're able to make these starts and do it at a high level. So for now, let's keep him stretched out, see where things take us, and then by the end of the season, maybe he is in that pen role. And that doesn't even mean that he wouldn't start in the future after that too. We've obviously seen that over the years with a number of Brewers pitchers. So keep him stretched out as long as you can, and then figure out where he might be needed. And if that's out of the pen, great. Otherwise, he might make starts. I wouldn't be shocked if Jerome made some starts for the Brewers this year too. So yeah, I'm definitely in. Keep him in the starter role as long as you can.
Before I forget too, we do have a couple of World Baseball Classic notes on some Brewers participants. So Venezuela beat the United States in the championship game. Angel Zerpa was a part of that team, as was William Contreras and Jackson Churio. So those guys getting to be part of that experience. Zerpa had a very impressive tournament out of the bullpen for Venezuela. The one that I saw was him freezing Ohtani when he painted that backdoor sinker to him.
Yeah,
when they knocked out Japan, that was an impressive pitch. Still a guy who kind of like he's flown under the radar in Brewers camp now because he hasn't been in Brewers camp. Instead, he's doing this stuff in a playoff-like atmosphere instead of doing it in spring training games. But going to be a guy who I think we both still believe is going to get a lot of very big outs for the Brewers this year. And I'm telling you, like I think the Brewers are going to come so far out ahead on this trade, and it's not going to be close. I really do believe that. Nick Mears, by the way, though, I did see he's throwing a actually pretty good changeup now in Kansas City. They taught him a changeup.
Nice.
Something the Brewers don't do this, but
they don't.
The other teams do apparently. But like Mears' fastball velo is down. He's added a sinker too to try to combat some of the issues we talked about with the four-seamers. So I still don't think he's going to be great this year. Maybe the changeup kind of gives him a little more to work with because that's probably like the one other legitimately good pitch he has now on top of the slider. Maybe evens out kind of those lefty issues that we talked about last year. But I still think the Brewers are going to be looking pretty good when this one's all said and done. Bryce Terang, though, was probably the biggest standout of the tournament among Brewers, named to the all-tournament team. I believe the lone Brewers position player named to the all-tournament team from the WBC. He was one of the better hitters on Team USA, really putting himself on the map. Good for his stock on the national stage. Finally, Andrew Fisher. This is probably the one that Spencer's most excited about. Really nice showing both at the plate and in the field for Team Italy. And Spencer, I know you had concerns about the ability to maybe stick at third base out of the draft. Is the showing in the field maybe an even bigger deal for you than what he did with the bat for Team Italy?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it looked like a guy who had played quite a bit of third base in recent years, and he hasn't. He really has barely played it at all. He played it a little bit at his previous stops prior to Tennessee through his college career, but it looked comfortable. It looked like, especially just making some turns, that kind of awkward throw from third base to second base on a double play turn that can be a little tricky for guys who aren't super comfortable over there. The footwork's got to be in a good spot. Saw him come in on a couple balls really well. He went left and right. Coming in on the ball was like the biggest concern I had after seeing him in person. And granted, I saw him in person in like his third game at third base in pro ball. So like this was very early on in the process of him getting reacquainted over there, but it looked very uncomfortable, him coming in on the ball. And he didn't look that way in the tournament, facing guys who are, hard hit balls that are coming off the bat of big leaguers and really good baseball players. And it just didn't look out of place at all seeing him over there. And then the bat, I talked about this, I think, when we first mentioned that he was, we talked about his homer against the Reds in spring training just before he had left for the WBC, but and the bat speed is there. That was the one thing that when I saw it in person, I was like, oh, that's not really what I was expecting. Like, it didn't look that great. It didn't look like it was that quick of a swing, that fast of hands, that fast of bat speed. As it turns out, he was dealing with a bit of a wrist thing when he first got into pro ball, so that was inhibiting him a little bit, but I didn't know how that was going to look when he got healthy. Yeah, seeing it now, like, it's the bat speed is not a problem at all. We've seen, 110 off the bat. We've seen hard hit in the air. I came out with my own top 100 recently for prospects for the system, and Fisher was 9th. He's not 9th currently. If you I think I have him 5th or 6th, and that's probably still iffy. Like, I could make an argument for him as the 3rd best prospect right now, just based on what I've seen, what I already knew about him, and then what I've seen this spring. Like, he's looked fantastic. He's looked really, really good, checking pretty much every single box that I was hoping to see him check. And then, he was facing, I don't think he faced below a AA level pitcher in the WBC, and he obviously hasn't touched AA himself in the minors yet. So the fact that he was seeing major leaguers and then high minor league level pitchers, and I mean, he looked very comfortable. It was all very, very encouraging. I really couldn't have come out of it any happier with what I saw. And he put himself in a really good spot going into the season. It's going to be really interesting to me to see where they place him. I think you could easily argue AA is where he should be. I think he'll probably be back in Appleton for like a few weeks. Give him, let's see what he does in high A for a few weeks and then give him that promotion. But if they put him in AA, you'll hear no arguments from me.
Kind of gives us a good seg to finish the show talking about prospects. Spencer has a Patreon up now with all of his prospect coverage, so you can pay for it. You can get even more prospect coverage if you like even more prospect coverage. I've seen some of the stuff that he's put up on here. He showed it to me a little bit before he went public with this because he was kind of toying around with launching something like this. And it's some sicko stuff. And I mean that in a good way. But before we close out here, I'll just give you a chance to kind of pitch what you've got going on and where people can find it and kind of, how they can contribute and allow you to keep doing that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It is definitely sicko stuff. That has been how it's been described to me by basically everyone that has seen it already. So I think we're hitting the mark on that. But no, you can find it at Backfield Brew. It's just patreon.com/Backfield Brew. I have like I mentioned, my top 100. It's got multi-paragraph write-ups for every single player in the top 100, just for the Brewers system. It's got grades. It's got tool grades for all of them, including whatever pitches they throw. And then on the offensive side, arm. I've got swing decisions and bat to ball as some other extra stuff on there. So it's in depth for sure. It's something that, as Jack kind of mentioned, I have been toying around with for a long time. I have at the $12 level, you can get access to my actual spreadsheet, that is easily the most sicko thing that I have going on right now. Jack has seen that one. He's accessed it before. It's got every single player in the system. It has links to all of their, minor league pages on Fangraphs, MILB, Baseball America, any of that. It's got their social media. It's got all of the bio information. And then it has, I think for 80% of them, I have tool grades on there for them. Obviously, some DSL guys and stuff I don't know enough about to be able to grade them. But if I see them at all, they're going to have a little bit of a write-up. They're going to have tool grades. I try and collect video on there for people if they want to be able to click on the video links. It's got just about everything you could imagine is the hope. But yeah, you can get access to that at the highest level. And then at the other levels, you get access to to the other level, I should say, you get access to all of these articles. Like I said, I have the top 100 out. I put out 5 deep sleepers that weren't on the top 100 today. I did a quick article about Braylon Owens, who the Brewers PD posted video of him after his spring training outing the other day. He was the Brewers 10th round pick. He struck out 10 out of 15 batters he faced in his spring training outing the other day, including an immaculate inning. So like wasn't on my top 100. Figured I'd break down some of like the stuff that he showed in college, that type of stuff. So trying to put out anything that I can. And it'll be a lot easier once we get into games and I can kind of start talking about what I'm seeing and things that have changed. But obviously appreciate everyone's support that already has supported me and has gone on there and subscribed. Happy to answer any questions anybody has, but yeah, it's patreon.com/backfieldbrew, and you can find it on my Twitter. I'll be tweeting out any links or anything that come up from it as we go. But new thing, trying it out. I don't like asking for money, and I don't like just this whole thing feels a little off to me. I'm not a huge fan of the general feel of it. It's just an uncomfortable thing for me, but at the same time, it does help, especially the more I keep doing this, like to have a little bit of a backing towards how often and how much I'm putting into this, because I do already put a lot into it. But just it helps. It helps everything I get. And I do appreciate anyone who has or does support me.
Well, you don't like to ask for money, but I have no problems with telling people that they should give you money. So you should give Spencer money for his prospect coverage. And now you have the opportunity to do that again. Patreon.com/backfieldbrew. That's going to do it for us this week on the Brewer Fanatic podcast. At this time next week, we will be talking about opening day baseball. We'll be recapping the first regular season game of the 2026 season. It's finally here. So we'll have some more legitimate coverage, games that mean something at this time next week. Until then, thank you all for listening.